This conversation is taking place at the Grand Opera House.
We're talking with Delaware's Attorney General, Beau Biden. Welcome, Beau.
Good to be here, John.
The Office of Attorney General is arguably the second most powerful in the state after the governor's. You have broad subpoena powers and law enforcement powers. You're the chief civil litigator for the state of Delaware. How do you prioritize things in this sort of vast complex that is the Department of Justice?
Well, it kind of prioritizes itself. We have 4 divisions: criminal divisions, you say, civil division, where we represent all the state agencies, both offensively and defensively, as well as providing a general counsel function to the state agencies. We have a fraud division, where we do a lot of the consumer protection work, as well as the investigations of some of the national banks that we're working on, as well as a family division we created, where we kind of try to begin to connect the dots on people who were the victims of child abuse and neglect, and people who are victims of domestic violence, and beginning to connect the dots of how families are affected by crime. The reality is I spend a big chunk of my time in the criminal work, trying to fight crime and prosecute the cases that are brought to us by the 37 different agencies, police agencies throughout the state. But a big chunk of my time is spent both on each of the other divisions. I would say it breaks out fairly evenly throughout each of the divisions, although the public sees most of our work in the form of the work in the criminal division, because that's usually the work that gets the most coverage, the bad stuff that happens to people and victims and survivors of crimes.
One of the things that you've had to deal with is the whole fallout from the Dr. Bradley case, the heinous child sex abuse. I gather that went right to the top once it was uncovered. How was that to deal with emotionally for you, for a father?
I've not been involved in anything in my professional life, in my public life, and quite frankly, my personal life that's had more of an impact. And you have literally hundreds of survivors of this awful episode and case. And I'm not at liberty to talk in detail about it, but what I can say is that it's something that I've been dealing with from the moment I learned of this, as have a number of deputies in my office, as well as a whole group in our office that works on many of the cases you referred to earlier, including Bradley, and that is our victim services folks, counselors, trained counselors who worked on the Bradley case and continue to work on the Bradley case. 2 focus on the Bradley case I've had since the beginning, since about December 16th. Number 1, making sure that Earl Bradley never walks out of a prison alive, and we achieved that in August of this year. And 2, making sure that we do everything we can now and going forward for as long as it takes to provide for the survivors of this case, the children and their parents. As a dad, as you know, John, there's nothing worse than doing harm to a child. And so it's had its impact on our office, but nothing compares to the impact it's had on these survivors.
Earl Bradley's in jail now and will be forever. We're all glad about that. But I guess there's the concern that it could happen again. Can you talk about the safeguards that have been established to help prevent an Earl Bradley episode from recurring?
Well, we revised some of the law in Delaware to make sure that every citizen of the state, whether they be a healthcare professional, a doctor, a nurse, or just a citizen, that they understand that Delaware law requires, and it did before Bradley, and it's very clear now, that every citizen of the state, every citizen, has an obligation to report any abuse or neglect to the state of Delaware, to the Division of Family Services or my office. And if they don't do it, they are going to come in, our office is going to come calling. You have an obligation under the law of the state of Delaware to report. That's number 1. Number 2, 1 in 4 girls is sexually assaulted before they're 18. 1 in 6 boys is sexually assaulted before they're 18. Only 1 out of 10 ever report it, because 9 out of the 10 of the perpetrators know or say they love the person they victimized. This is endemic in our society. It's not just the church. I'm a practicing Catholic. It's not just universities. See Penn State or Syracuse University, where I went to law school. Pedophiles go to where the victims are, and that's places where we entrust our children. So the most important message for the listeners of this show and of this great program: one takeaway everyone should know is anywhere you entrust your child, make sure that there's never a situation that that institution or entity where you entrust your children allow for a one-on-one setting between an adult and a child. That should never occur. School, scouting, church, camp, no matter where it is, you should make sure that a policy is such that no child is ever alone with any adult at that institution. If we do that and guarantee that, we'll go a long way to stopping and preventing child abuse, rape, and neglect, and pedophilia. It's a word people don't even like to hear me say. Go to darknesstolight.com. We are in our office working with Michael Graves, the YMCA of Delaware, and Prevent Child Abuse Delaware, the lead partners on this. Our goal is to educate 35,000 Delawareans over the next 5 years about how to spot the signs of abuse and neglect and do something about it. We must make this our business, even if it's not your own family.
Thanks, Beau.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
You're connected with Content Delaware.